Assalamu alaikum everybody. मेरा नाम समर हसन है and I'm the co-founder of Epiphany. Like you know, I am the co-founder of Epiphany. आप लोग थक चुके हैं मेरी शक्ल देख देख के. इसलिए once again, for today's session, we've got another person who's going to be moderating. I'm just going to quickly do the introduction of the program in Urdu because there are many of us who will understand our national language better. But of course, because our guests are international, the rest of the program is going to be in English. So very quickly, आज का जो प्रोग्राम है हमारे लिए नंबर 17वां नंबर है इसका Epiphany Talks का और जैसे कि आपको मालूम है हमने काफ़ी सारे सेशंस गेमिंग के ऊपर ई-स्पोर्ट्स के ऊपर जो इमर्जिंग इकोनॉमी है जो इमर्जिंग इंडस्ट्रीज़ हैं उसके ऊपर हमने फोकस किया है एसेंशली बिकॉज हमें लगता है कि सब लोगों को मालूम होना चाहिए व्हाट द फ्यूचर होल्ड्स अब फ्यूचर के अंदर कौन से नए एरियाज हैं जिसको आपको एक्सप्लोर करना चाहिए both career perspective से भी plus obviously it's exciting right who doesn't want to play games ठीक है so I'm sure आप लोग सबने भी खेले होंगे maybe Mario Brothers खेला हो maybe अगर किसी ने पुयान खेला है तो प्लीज मुझे बताएं आई थिंक मैं सिर्फ वाहिद इंसान हूँ जिसने पुयान नाम की एक चीज खेली है at a certain point in time anyway so आज के जो पैनलिस्ट हैं वो सब के सब माहिर हैं अपनी फील्ड के अंदर और वो ई स्पोर्ट्स के बारे में बहुत ज़्यादा जानकारी रखते हैं तो आज हमारा पूरा जो सेशन है वो ई स्पोर्ट्स के बारे में है कैसे आप प्रो गेमर बन सकते हैं क्या क्या उसके अंदर चैलेंजेस हैं क्या क्या उसके अंदर क्या क्या रिस्क्स होते हैं फिजिकल और मेंटल रिस्क्स जो कि एक को कंसिडर करने चाहिए अगर वो प्रो गेमिंग का करियर परसू करना चाहता है कैसे प्रो गेमर्स की पर्सनल लाइफ कभी कभी इफेक्ट होती है जब उनकी बहुत बड़ी फैन फॉलोइंग हो जाती है कुछ टिपिकल करियर पाथ होता है टू फॉलो एंड सो ऑन एंड सो फॉर ठीक है सो ये सारी चीज़ें आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे and without much ado I'm going to quickly introduce our moderator Kate Edwards. So I understand that people are so tired of seeing my face and perhaps I'm tired of listening to myself जो कि बहुत ही rare एक चीज़ है एक rare phenomena है I don't think a lot of people go through that but I'm just kidding around so anyway but we are really really pleased and delighted to have Kate Edwards agree to be our moderator for the session today. She's the executive director of Global Game Jam in the US where she's joining us live. So I'm going to add her very quickly and then allow her to introduce the rest of the panelists. Hello, Kate. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this for us. I am super excited.
I'm more than happy to. It's great. I really appreciate this event.
So please tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then I'm going to disappear and let you introduce the other panelists.
Sure. So I've been in the game industry for over 27 years, and I'm a geographer actually who does culturalization work. So I've been helping game developers adapt their games for other cultures and for other countries. And I've worked on a lot of titles people probably have heard of, like Halo and Call of Duty and Fable and Age of Empires and Tomb Raider and many, many others. And in addition to that, I also am, as you mentioned, the executive director of the Global Game Jam, which is the world's largest game creation event that happens every January.
Okay, that's excellent. Can I have your autograph, please?
Sure, here you go.
Okay, so I'm going to disappear, Kate, and thank you once again, and please feel free to invite the rest of the panelists.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And again, welcome to this panel about pro gaming as a career. And so I would like to introduce our panelists, starting with Ilse. She's a 3D animator at Mr. X based in Canada. So welcome, Ilse.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here surrounded by such talented people and in this panel that speaks about a very important subject. Introducing myself, I am an animator working in VFX and feature animation. I work in Canada, but I'm really from Mexico. I have worked in the French video game En Garde, which won a Ping Award in 2018. And yeah, I'm in the industry related to video games.
Awesome. And our other panelist is Jaymes Hines, managing partner at Fanverse and Beyond Esports, both based in the US.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure. Again, my name is Jaymes Hines. Beyond Esports, it's a venture studio. We're focused on next generation tools for gamers and the gaming community. Anything, because we look at gaming career paths that are post being a player. Just like a traditional athlete will age out and do something else that's related to things they're passionate about. We believe the gaming community is tied to so many tech-related careers in AR, VR, blockchain, and in animation and stuff. My own background is I started out with .com gaming during that era, making music and mini games that were music driven, based out of Los Angeles, that were tied to titles that were related to different music genres, the Motown game, arts and entertainment. But today I'm excited to participate with a bunch of amazing folks to talk about career options, esports and gaming, as well as game jam, because I'm a big fan.
Awesome. And then thank you. And then finally, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Cris Reed, who's an investor advisor with a Level Up Experience podcast host. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Kate, and I'm really looking forward to being with the panelists. So, as you mentioned, I host a Level Up Experience podcast, where I focus on highlighting influential figures in esports and gaming, and also in emerging tech sectors. I had the privilege to interview pro players, startups, organizations, so a very wide gamut of people who I interview. Also, a board advisor for several tech startups inside the esports and gaming space, ranging from platform as a service for a virtual event company, as well as education and human performance sector.
Excellent. So let's dive in here. So we've got this topic about pro gaming as a career path or as a career in general. And so I know that there's probably people watching who are really eager to wonder, how can I do this? I would love to play games for a living and make good money off it and all that fun stuff. But is there a typical career path? I mean, is there kind of like, when somebody decides I want to do pro gaming for the rest of my life, how do I actually do it? So do you think there's a typical path people take? And if there is, what does that look like? And if there isn't, then what do people do?
Okay, I'll give it a shot quickly. I think esports and gaming is similar to traditional sports in that there are a range of things to do. But to stay on point with your question, a traditional athlete doesn't play forever. A traditional gamer will not play pro gaming forever. So they need to look at a range of things that they want to do aside from becoming a pro gamer that's probably on a professional team that's winning purses and championships. It's important to look at, there's broadcasting, shoutcasting, there's the range of pre and post-production skill sets. And these can start as early as high school, if not earlier. And just as a pro athlete has to start their career path high school forward or even junior high, esports pro gamers need to look at the same opportunities, how to have a conversation with their parent household and say, this is the path that we should be on as I figure out how to become professionally employed.
Yeah, I had a guest on a couple months ago, Pavan Lacat, and he won $100,000 in a Madden Club Series championship at 18 years old.
Wow.
And I asked him, I said, how did you get started? Like, how did you know Madden was going to be something that you played, right? And it was just something he said, he said, I just started doing it. I started attaching myself and really just putting in, hours of practicing, and he used it as an art and a craft, is what he told me. So it's really, you have to have that buy-in and that level of intensity. I sat there in that interview, and just the way these professional esports athletes talk about what they do, it is their career. It is such a big part of what they do. It's not just a little window of 2 hours, I'm going to play a game. It is a career. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to kind of dissect it. But I thought that story was interesting with him. But it's really also about putting yourself out there as well through content creation, which we'll get into that as well. There's that layer to it through streaming and things like that. Because you have skill sets, but if no one knows your skill set, then no one can even have conversations with you from organization level. So there's a lot of different things that we'll dive into.
Yeah, I think it's what you said, Cris, is very important, because usually there are problems with the family. When people want to become serious pro gamers, usually our parents' generation is not super supportive of that. Even though if you see pro gaming, it started like in the early 60s. So it's been around for a while, but now it's a multi-million-dollar industry in China, in the US, in North America, in many countries. So there are a lot of opportunities, but you usually see parents not believing it's sports or not thinking they're really athletes, where when they are, it's a very complex scheme of abilities. And yeah, right now there are many different opportunities. Fortunately, there are summer camps now, there are universities that encourage this. So yeah, I think we need to get out of that bubble, and we need to understand pro gaming is a serious sport, and it's super complicated to get into those leagues.
If I can make a quick one, just
Sure.
to that point there, there was a story of in Minnesota, this college class, high school class, was taking the usual college tours, and on campus, the guidance counselor who led the thing noticed that there were a bunch of college kids lined up to this new building. He said, "What is this?" He said, "We went to it and realized it was an esports team was being formed, and that college was offering esports scholarships." So we went back to his high school and gave the speech to the principal. The principal said, "Go ahead and form this." He formed the team, and in the first year of his esports team at the high school level, 6 kids on the team won over $400,000 in college scholarships.
Wow.
Okay, think about this. How long it takes for a traditional sports team in the high school level to build the skill level to win championships, let alone create college level players. And then in doing this interview, they also spoke with the parent, one of the dads of the kids, who once he understood this, just like if his child played a traditional sport, helped him create a regimen so that they could be considered college worthy, both academically and skilled on that game that they were playing. And I say this because you're broadcasting to a wide audience, that it is parental or buy-in, because this role is a genuine opportunity to higher ed, to career skills, as well as gaming.
That's a fantastic point, and that kind of leads to my next question about the balance between, is this all about just pure raw talent and skill that somebody has at playing a particular type of game, or is there can you actually learn? Can you learn to be a pro gamer? And I love that you brought in the point about the parents as well, because I think a lot of us are imagining, just like you have kids who want to do gymnastics or be a pro football player or whatever it might be. I have a friend whose daughter is probably going to do archery in the Olympics someday. And I know how much effort they put into her, and they're so focused, and just like you said, they have that buy-in, and they fully believe that she wants to do this, and they're supporting her all the way. And so it's kind of, we have these images of parents telling their kids, get back in your room and keep playing video games. You're not done yet. So I'm curious though about that question about just the raw talent and skill, or is this something that you can actually learn somehow? Is there an educational program that people could pursue?
Yeah, I'll take this to start. So my brother is a top, say 75 to top 50 Smash Melee player in the world. And he started in like 2013 to get really serious about it. We actually played, if you know Smash Melee, it's 20 years old. So I used to play it when I was like a teenager, and he was 6 years younger than me. And I made him cry many, many times. Well, he made me cry many times afterwards, and I don't like playing him anymore. But so for me, I got to see him over the last 7 years. So like in 2013, he started locally. Like you have to start somewhere, right? With any skill set. I also have experience coaching wrestling for over a decade, and you have to start somewhere, right? So he had to start locally and build up. Like he loved the game, but just because you love the game or the title doesn't mean you're good at it yet, right? So, but he had the passion, to get good at it. Like you have to be willing to put in the time. So he started in 2013, getting a little bit of momentum and things like that, and then start beating people you're not supposed to beat, right? And if you're a wrestler, it's the same thing. He's a wrestler. I coached him in wrestling too. So he took that mentality from wrestling, traditional sports side, into the esports side. And then that was his journey from 2013. And then he started streaming in 2015, showcasing the skill set, showcasing his story. Then he got partnered on Twitch in 2018. And everybody knows that Twitch, that's a big deal. Not affiliate, but partner, right? And he got that in 2018. But it was all of a process. Like it took 5 years, to get to that Twitch partner level, right? And then now he's beaten top 25 players in the world in Smash Melee. But it didn't happen. Wow. It took 5 years, right? So I've seen it firsthand because I followed his story so closely. I'm not a pro gamer myself. I always make sure people that know me. I'm not a professional esports player, but I've seen someone, very close to me go through that process.
That's amazing. And you were saying, like, is it pure talent? I would say somebody obviously has to be good at a certain game, and they have to practice over and over and over. And once they think they're very good, they really would have to spend more than 50 hours a week just practicing. I bet Cris can see this with his brother probably. When you want to be pro, you have to treat yourself as an athlete, and that can be very isolating and kind of complicated. And there's a lot of things that come with it. You also need to be very good at communication skills, because you have to be communicating with your team all the time. You need financial advice, because imagine all that money at 18 years old. That's insane for anyone. So you can have people who sponsor you, and you have to understand all the financial aspects, as well as leadership and being able to communicate wisely with your team. So I think there's a lot more than we sometimes take into account.
Agreed, particularly when you're trying to pursue a pro career, as was said here, but there are many paths. Some esports are a walk-on where you can just, the talent, you've been recognized somewhere and they just reach directly to you. And some of these are going to require the path of high school going on to college, which means your academic side needs to be aligned with your gaming capabilities. So while there are many different online coaching courses that can teach you specific skills on certain games that are popular for you have to also apply that energy to making sure you're academically sound, because the colleges that are making these offers are taking on a student athlete. And if you're not the student part, you won't be the esports athlete part.
No, that's a great point. I mean, I know people who went into professional sports, and one in particular I know played in the NBA. He was a pro basketball player, and he had seen other people stumble because all they did was focus on the talent and not any educational background at all. And so once they, like you mentioned earlier, once they were done with their playing career, because that will happen, so they got to like their mid-30s, they're like, now what am I supposed to do? And they didn't really have anything to do. Whereas my friend, he got an MBA, he got his bachelor's degree, MBA, and basically he had this vision for what he was going to do after his gaming career was over, his playing career, I should say. But building on what you've said so far, I'm curious, like Ilse, you brought up the business side about knowing about finances and things like that. I'm wondering to what degree you think somebody who's in pro gaming needs to have a good understanding of not just the business around their talent, being promoted and all that kind of stuff, but also the larger sense of the business of the game industry, like how games are made and how different features get built into games and things like that. So I'm kind of curious to what level you think they need to be aware of all these other aspects of the game industry and not just the playing part.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you mentioned that. I form part of the creation of the video games, so I kind of understand the way they function, and I don't really believe that they need to understand the programming, the animation, the rigging, the things that go really behind the video game so much as the gameplay of different video games, right? I think the more games they know, the more they can open their path to be better at a certain game, because that opens your mind and gives you a lot of different possibilities. I don't think they really need to go in the technical aspect of video games. I'm not sure, but that's what I see from the inside. And I do believe they have to be very aware about the industry side, like what is going on in the gaming community, which games are new right now, where is the industry leaning towards. Right now, we can see a lot of augmented reality and virtual reality. And I think that's going to be the future. And for everybody who says that gamers are not athletes, which is wrong, they will be, because it's going to be VR soon. And I am dying to see all these competitions where people just run marathons and they ditch obstacles. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it turns out in the future. And so pro gamers need to be very aware of what's happening, so they can have either one game they are specific in, or they can start leaning towards more and more varieties of games.
Yeah, I agree with that. Everything you said, Ilse, especially I think more so on the content distribution side. They should be more aware of how to get their content out there, because really that's not just to get in front of people, just to be in front of people, but for example, putting their content on LinkedIn, getting those relationships and those strategic alliances of working with corporations and other organizations, but putting yourself out there through your content. Obviously, in-game technique and things like that, that's important, but being able to put all that together, kind of a quasi portfolio, is something that obviously over the last few years, pro players are learning more about that, but I think that there's still room to be able to have a content portfolio, what that looks like.
I think that for those who choose to, there is an opportunity to dig deeper as a player, because unlike traditional sports where you're a player on the team, you have a role, you listen to a coach who tells you what plays and to show up, and every once in a while you can break play. Gaming, the people who play games can also create games and create different things to improve the form factor. For example, by large, women have a different handprint than men. It's smaller. So the form factor is no reason that there couldn't be mouse that are or controllers that are more custom to that particular segment of the population. It doesn't change the gameplay. It just makes it more aligned to there are differences between the different players. With that said, let me jump to something that was earlier about the business side that Ilse brought up, and that is esports athletes are going to have the same thing as traditional, something called Southern Wealth Syndrome, where you suddenly have money, and it's not just you need to understand the business side, but also different ways that you could lose it, overspending, and a ton of things. And we have traditional sports to look at, whether it's cricket, soccer, football, baseball, basketball, whatever, and look at our athletes that we love and look at their ups and downs and say how to avoid this. And this is done through intent. So you have to intent say, we are going to do these things. And if outcomes happen the way we imagine, let's also avoid these other things that come traditionally with those outcomes.
Well, and just real quick, an example of that is, a streamer, you get a donation. That's one of the ways that you can make revenue, right? Through donations. So someone sends you $1,000, right? Well, if you don't understand finances, you think you just got $1,000, but actually it's more like 700 or 650 when taxes, right? So then having just little things with having two separate accounts, like you don't have 1,000, you have 700 or 600, right? And you actually put the 600 in one account and put the 400 in the other, because that's going to be your taxes, right? So like little things like that, because how many stories are out there of tax issues, right? And it doesn't matter how good of a player you are in any sports, if you have tax issues, you're in trouble. Like your career's over, right? So I mean that's things you may not think about, because maybe you started streaming. Here's a lot of stories like this. You have a streamer that just streams because they enjoy what they're doing. They didn't even want to start a business. But they started streaming, and then they started getting donations and subscriptions, and they're like, and it just blows up, and then their YouTube ad subscription goes way up, but then they didn't plan on the business. Like there wasn't a day like, all right, sure. I'm forming my business today, like that a lot of times doesn't happen, right? It's very organic. So, but you can get a lot of trouble. You get a lot of trouble.
Right. Yeah, but that plays just like traditional sports. For example, LeBron has a crew around him who's skilled at doing things that he doesn't do that makes up his professional services. Esports athletes, when you say player careers, there's a lot of career roles that can surround that awesome, talented gamer in this town or community we're speaking to live on the net. So it's important that young people look at a range of support roles that are needed to grow the industry and the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, is that, the thinking about when you're going into a pro gaming career, it's not just you, it's you, you're bringing a team of support people, not just your parents, but, all these other people, your accountant,
your videographer, your accountant,
your lawyer,
I mean,
all these people. So yeah, that's something very important for people to think about. It's like, you're going to have to build up your support team to see you through this. So you don't have to focus on that. And I know, because having spoken to, there are parallels with people who go into indie game development. So if they say, I want to make a game, and they have the skills to make a game. And oftentimes I mentor people like this, and I have to tell them, you are making a game, but what you're really making is a business, because you ask them the question, what happens if your game is successful? And you actually start making money off this thing. And they're like, I don't know. I'll just cross that bridge when it comes. Like, well, like to Chris's point, it's like, well, you better cross it a lot sooner, because you're going to be owing a lot of money, taxes and other things for what's going to happen to you. But I wanted to kind of shift a little bit, because I know all of you, and I know Cris in particular, has brought up this point about generating your own content, and it kind of brings up that issue of fan relations. So, what steps or what should people expect in terms of the overhead? It's not just about being excellent at the games that you chose to play, but it's also the whole, the persona that you put out there, the public face, the content you generate, how you relate to fans. So what does that look like for someone who's in pro gaming?
Well, I think any kind of thing that you do that becomes famous, that is like media related, that press pays attention to, all those little careers, whether it's politics, you're a singer, you're an actor, any of those you're always in the eye, and people are gonna go for you, harass you sometimes. They're gonna be in your intimacy, and you're not gonna like that all the time. So you gotta be very well prepared, well-rounded mentally to be able to put up with all that, and to also understand that when you become a public figure, you sort of lose that privilege of being by yourself and not caring about anyone else. You kind of have to give that to people. I don't really agree with the idea of you owe it to them, but in a way they are part of your fame. And these are huge tournaments, and we're speaking about millions of people who follow all these trends, and it's normal. More like in China, we can see that gamers are really, really harassed by people, and well, that's fun. It's something that's been changing, and we have to adapt as any media-related career.
Yeah, and to your point, you are pretty much always on, right? So going back to the producing content, a lot of teams and organizations, like in their schedules for their players, they have content time. Like literally, here's a block of time that we're making content specifically for the organization, right? So you're out there. So it's not just about in-game mechanics, like you mentioned. It is about the content. And there was actually an interesting interview. Landon Gorbenko was a good friend of mine, the Northern Esports Academy, and he talked about that. I just listened to this yesterday, and he mentioned, organizations looking at amateur players that are trying to go pro, like bridge that gap, and they're recruiting. They look at your Twitter, they look at your Twitch, they look at what you're saying. They look at what you're saying, and they're at this point now, especially now, when we look at some of all the toxicity and some of that very unfortunate things that's happening and that's happened in esports and gaming in the industry, and they're getting rid of it. They're trying to at least they're trying to battle toxicity, right? And if you've got toxic things all over your social, you think those organizations really want to talk to you? And it's something to really think about. And maybe it hasn't been so much the last few years, but I'm obviously what's happened over the last few months, especially, it's just something to really think about. If you are an amateur player and you're trying to be a part of an organization, think about who you are as a person, because your skill set could be 10 out of 10, but you as a human being, that's being more evaluated more than ever.
Agreed. And there's a lot of place to get these stories. If you're looking at, for example, Comic-Con, and they went online this year, and so they have live panels and workshops similar to what we're doing here, similar to GDC, Game Developer Conference, where there's how to do this, how to make this. This is my journey, my story. YouTube and these other organizations I just mentioned are full of how-to the gaming industry, that you can take your own time to view anything from how to make a game to how to handle success, how to handle failure. I mean, post this great show in these other talks we're describing, there are plenty of resources that you have to spend time to research and listen, as well as then create, as Cris Ilse said. It's all important because it's all a gig. When I work with startups, they think their job is to code every day. No, some of their job is to sit back and listen to other experts and to talk through next steps, because coding really becomes, when you're in the top accelerator, that's your evening and weekend gig. During the day, you're working with many experts who are trying to ramp you up in all the other areas that have zero to do with actual coding, in this game, gameplay. It's a balance, and it's all important.
Those are all great points. So when it comes to, dealing with fans, and what that entails. I mean, like you said, Cris and Ilse, and you brought up, having to be always on, having your life evaluated right in front of your face, everything you say. Obviously, there's going to be some kind of toll that happens to you if you're not able to deal with this. I mean, so there's a physical and mental wellness aspect to all of this. So, I mean, I'm curious about hearing your thoughts, not just about the physical part of it, because you are an athlete, and like a pro athlete who plays football or some other sport, they make sure they're in good shape. And I know there are pro gamers who do have some kind of like physical workout regime, but there's also that mental wellness aspect to it, of not only to maintain your focus during gameplay, but deal with all this stuff about fan relations and what's being said about you and all that kind of stuff. So how do you deal with that? I mean, it's given all of that, I mean, what advice would you have to people, or warnings or whatever, around those issues, who want to go into pro gaming?
Yeah, well, it's very important. Everything you're mentioning is so crucial to gaming. And yeah, you get all these different kinds of physical issues like trauma, because you're always constantly in the same positions, using the same keys on the keyboard and the mouse repeatedly like this. So you get carpal tunnel syndrome, tennis elbow, trigger finger, because you're always doing this, nerve pinching, everything. I have had those just for animating, because I'm always in the computer and I have to wear like special gear to be ready, and you have to have a proper mouse, a proper chair, a proper screen. And sometimes, you don't even realize that the monitor and the way it's calibrated, it's so important for your eye strain. So it's very important that they consider all these health risks, that they maybe check videos of physiotherapists, of gamers. It's something that exists and it's out there, and they know a lot. And but it's something that you mentioned that's very important. It's the mental wellness, right? Because I was a child actor, and so I know what's like. Suddenly, like, you jump to fame and you don't understand where all this kind of attention is coming from, right? You gotta be very strong mentally, because it's just strange to suddenly have power, because you feel like you have power, and you kind of need a family who orients you and says like, no, it's getting on your head, like, not at all. That's not the path you should follow. And you gotta have people to kind of coach you, I think, mostly when you're young, because it can be very nerve-wracking and sort of like a difficult experience. And also, esports tend to be very isolating, and you have to spend a lot of time in front of a screen, losing track of time and your life and your family and your friends, just because you're there in your game 100%. And that's kind of what you need to excel. So to a certain extent, yes, you need to put yourself through that amount of pressure. But at the same time, you should have fun. You should have a life outside. You should try to balance the work and the life you have.
Yeah, so for esports pros, you take a look at an organization like Complexity Gaming. If you're familiar with Complexity, they have put such an importance around the physical and mental health of their players. Like they've made it so much about their identity. Like if you play for Complexity, like we are going to be a part of helping you and taking care of you on the physical and on the mental side. And you just see, I mean, think about all the countless stories just the last few months of players leaving specific games, leaving. You know, Sinatra going to Valorant from Overwatch, and specifically saying because of Burnout. Because another part that hasn't mentioned is the meta. If a game is changing constantly, that's another layer of stress on top of everything else everyone has mentioned on the panel already, right? So if the meta of a game changes even faster than other games, that's making you adapt even more, like even month to month. Like it's tough enough to master something, but then now I got to remaster it next month and then the next month, right? So that leads to mental burnout, so physical and mental burnout. And then you saw Uzi retire. At 23 years old, the best player in the world in what he does in the league, one of the best players, and retires. And I have a quote from him. He says, as a result of staying up late for years, a fatty diet, and being under insurmountable stress, last year I found out I was type 2 diabetic. I've slowly changed my schedule, controlled my diet, trying to exercise and lose weight, also take medicine, but the situation has not changed. Plus, I already have severe hand injury that I have my physical conditions that don't allow me to fight anymore. He said that.
Wow.
At 23 years old.
And, I come from a traditional entertainment and sports background in that I've been 20 some years in Los Angeles. You run around people who've been from child actors to adults who have the pressures of being in the entertainment industry, and they have to, as was mentioned earlier, build up a good support system and resilience, because there is a pre-social, there's a lot of pressure with people always coming at you both professionally and personally. And then you live in some states, where California, where your word is contractual. You can just say something you don't mean to say, and they're like, really? And with that said, and I grew up in a town that's very sports driven, Gary, Indiana. I actually went to high school with 2 7-footers, and today they're happy, healthy, who play basketball, and today they're individuals who are happy. That's at Cris' point. You have to be a happy individual. That has to be the biggest goal that you work with. And that's what we looked at when we came to the table. Beyond Esports is about anything that's except being a player. What are the tools that are here? What are the chairs you need? Herman Miller just did a thing with a Logitech, and we think that a lot more should come to the table. What's your mental, nutritional? I mean, there's a range of ecosystem support things that have to happen to create an amazing environment for everybody.
And go back to process. Your mental health is part of the process. Like, you don't wait until, I'm burnt out now I'm going to worry about my mental health. I think this goes way beyond esports. This goes to business. This goes to every part of our life in every industry. So you have to be like anything else, like with your body, you don't, like for Uzi's example, retiring, now he's type 2 diabetic, but now it's too late. Like if maybe a couple of years ago, there have been some protocols and processes put in place to kind of help combat it, right? That's the whole fitness. My other part of my life has been in the fitness industry. So that you have to get ahead of things versus reacting.
And I guess that also relates back to what we said before about having that support network around you, because we're not always the best judge of our current state of mind or state of body. We should be, if we're self-aware about it, which I think is part of the point here, is that we should be very self-aware of our mental and physical state. But we also need people around us who could, especially if we're in that professional role, who can check in on us and say, how are you feeling today? Did you do this? Did you do that? I mean, basically, that's the role of a coach. And having somebody, whoever that might be in your life, who can kind of help you with that, I think that's critical. And I do want to mention super quick a couple of resources for people. There are a couple of organizations in the game industry that serve both gamers and players and people who make games. One is called TakeThis.org, that deals with mental health in the game industry. And the other is called Safe in Our World, which is based out of the UK. And so if you're curious about resources or other information, I definitely suggest looking at those two organizations, because they do a lot of really good stuff around the issue of mental wellness. So, but speaking to that, one other thing I wanted to bring up a little bit, just briefly, is the mental wellness and the impact of having those fan reactions to you. Like, we know today that the community can be both a fantastic support mechanism and also a huge hindrance if you do something or say something that they don't like. And so, and sometimes we know that people, you just get harassed because you happen to be in the spotlight, and that's just the way it is. And I think all of us have had that to a certain degree. And I certainly know what that's like. And so how do you deal with that? I mean, what do you have any advice? I mean, other than what we've suggested in terms of, like, keeping check on your mental state, but how do you deal with harassment and all the kinds of things that are going on around you?
First off, you cannot do like Silent Bob and Jay and show up with a printout list of people who have said things about you and beat them up. You can't do that. The movie's got it all wrong.
Yeah.
I think you ask, where is this hate coming from? And what I mean by that is, what is this person? That person may not even think that about you, but maybe what are they going through? They might be going through something, and they are kind of spitting venom at whatever they see. and it's not necessarily a personal attack. It's just they're going through something very traumatic and something in their life, and they're throwing it out to other people. And trust me, this is hard. That's a hard perspective that to continue to have, and that's why the mental process of little things like doing box breathing, like 4 seconds in, hold 4 seconds, and breathe out 4 seconds. Little things like that throughout your day can help you recalibrate. But you're gonna have that. I'll tell you right now, not every person is gonna agree with what you say. It's just not gonna happen, right? So I guess expecting that, being very self-aware of yourself, but also asking, where's that potential coming from them? Maybe they're not really attacking me. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And plus, when you add this kind of like competitive thing that happens in sports, I bet they have a lot of hate, a different kind of hate, because people are worried that they're going to win a competition, or they don't agree with the final score or things like that. And I believe that social media can be very harmful and very, very intense. So maybe what you were asking, Kate, of how would I compensate it maybe having some kind of counselor or somebody who just takes care of that social media presence that you trust. And you can maybe make videos and make different little notes about what everything's like in your life, but maybe not reading through everything, because we're humans. And we can only take a certain amount of pressure, right? And we know people can be so harmful. And if you read 1,000 good comments and then one bad, you are going to think about that one bad comment a lot. So I do believe that people who take care of your social media presence would be a very comfortable solution. And just understanding when to isolate from the public eye, and just not going out all the time, having people who do stuff for you, which is always the case when you're very famous. And that's a good thing about the money. When you have the money, you can have those kind of commodities. But and also understanding that these people are just followers and they love what you do and they're interested, and just paying attention to them is very, very nice. And you can be an inspiration to people who want to follow your lead. And one day you probably were somebody exactly in that position where you look up to someone and you're like, oh my God, I hope they notice me in some way. So I think you got to be sweet and you got to be a good role model for everybody.
I'm going to take a part of what Ilse said, say something very serious, counter to what I said earlier, and that is, it is great to be nice, but it's not to be essential, because unfortunately, there is a lot of toxicity out there. And even if you have professional people who read the stuff, they can get overwhelmed, because toxicity is toxicity. It is great to read it, but you have to know when to pull back when it gets too much. But being nice is, to me, like treating someone else like you would like to be treated. But there has to be a clear line that you've already drawn as a human being in saying that this is not what I'm about and this is not what I accept. Because we just have, through social media, so many different ways of just consuming a lot of good and a lot of bad. And we need rules for ourselves and our teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I know that I've often told people when they're dealing with social media. It's like, if somebody's going to be blunt, that's one thing. If they're going to be constructively blunt, well, I'll listen to that, because they're actually trying to help. Maybe their demeanor or their tone is a little bit raw, but they're still, if you read carefully what they're saying, they might actually be trying to help you and make a suggestion. That kind of stuff is great, but sometimes it's hard, because as we know, if you just read comments, which is kind of the meme, don't read the comments, which tends to be true. But I think, to some of your points, like having someone on your team who actually kind of combs through that and say, hey, here was a comment that was, a little bit harsh, but actually they said some things that you might want to, listen to. And, if it's just pure hatred or vitriol, because we know there's people out there that just want to watch the world burn, we just kind of ignore those people and not really pay attention. But like to Ilse's point, I mean, it's unfortunate that our human brains are so focused on the negative part, because it's true. One negative comment will offset like 1,000 positive ones. And it's just the unfortunate part of being human, I guess. So, so one of the things, as we're kind of getting close to wrapping up here, I wanted to ask each of you, there's people watching, they're listening to all this, and they're not scared off yet, they're still watching, and they're like, yeah, okay, I want to do this. I want to be a pro gamer. So today, what do they do from here? Of course, everyone's in a different position, but what would be if you have one or two key pieces of advice, or what should they be starting to do now if they want to start getting into this?
For me, I'll take it from like, the network aspect of it, and you've got to put yourself out there. And now we just mentioned about social, how toxic it can be, things like that. So there's a little bit of a mindset to this, but I think putting yourself out there, putting out your skill sets, putting out there what you're passionate about, I think it's really important. And then just sharing your story, just saying, hey, I'm looking to be, a pro player in Rocket League. Like, here's where I am now. Here's what I want to do. And like, just document your process. So document your journey. Don't wait to start making content. Like, there's not going to be a day where you wake up and you'll say, oh, it's time to start showcasing myself. Like, start now. And then that's how you build relationships with people. And then here's the thing, you have no idea where one relationship can take you. That will lead to one other conversation, which leads to 3 other conversations that maybe allowed you to be a part of an organization. So it really is putting yourself out there. Again, going back, there's a mental side of that to be able to do that, but being able to work at that point to be able to put yourself out there and then establish relationships, because I think that's where it starts.
Ilse?
Okay, yeah.
Ladies.
Also, like, choosing what game you're good at, you excel at, choosing that one, understanding different strategies, watching pro gamers and how they play and how they communicate with their team. That's very important. And you will see hockey players and tennis players always playing back their competitions clips. So you can do that all the time, and that will help you get better and better. And eventually you can start going to tournaments, like even small ones in your community, then form a part of a team, and then join like bigger leagues and start gaming in a pro situation. And that always goes higher and higher. And yeah, I would suggest to take care of your health, your eyes. Like, I always have drops of like little teardrops to have my eyes properly hydrated, and my monitor well, and my chair well. And if you're going to spend that much time in a chair, your computer, you have to take care of all those things, as well as start, like Cris said, building relations. It's very important to, right now it's very easy, right? Because we have all these social media platforms, as well as LinkedIn, that's very professional platform, where we can talk to people we admire, and we can always make this interconnections between people. And you can talk to very, very important figures in the industry, and you can always build from there, start building a team, and put all your effort in if you want to do it. Because it's just like 0.1%, I think, that actually excel and that become pro. And you can be that 0.1%. But you do have to put that amount of pressure in yourself and that amount of responsibility. I wouldn't say pressure, because it's also a pleasure if you like it. So yeah, just commit to it and build from there.
I'm going to take a part of each one and then my own. I love what Cris says, process. It is super important that you document a process of how you got better, because that's what teams who are scouting are looking for. They're looking for people who show immediate progress, and they're like, wow, we need that person because they can help with this role on a particular game. I'm going to take Ilse's component about, look at how that you should be great at a particular game and be outstanding in that. That's the quickest way to get scouted and hired or scholarship. And our own point is also look at support is not just a secondary position. You be number one and being part of the infrastructure. Be the number one scout if you want to be the scout. Be the number one trainer. Be the number one whatever you want in gaming, because gaming and esports is a range of things. And just like people want the number one player, they also want the number one support system.
Sure.
Well,
yeah, the only thing I would add is, two things. So I've told my athletes for years on the traditional sports side with wrestling is that you have to write things down. Write down your goals. Number one, you have to write them down and see them every single day. So it's somewhere where your eyeballs cross because you need to see it and feel it. And then you have secondly, a process. So an actual schedule you write down that this is my process, not an overarching, well, I guess I'll do this at this time. Those two things are very important for structure. And like Jaymes mentioned, an organization sees that you have a process, you're going to go to the top of the list because they see you're taking it seriously.
Those are all great points. So as we're closing here, one quick question did come up, and is there any one type of game which is a good starting point for a pro gaming career, like a first-person shooter or MOBA, or have you seen that there's any particular type that is more ideal to getting into it, or does it really matter?
Play what you love.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean, that's where I go to. Like, into all the conversations I've had with my brother and other players, it's you find what you love, and then you'll be able to put in the time. Like, it won't feel like work. It's funny I say that because that's in any industry. So a lot of this is crossover, but you do what you love. Now it sounds easy. You're like, oh, just do what you love. You're like, okay, but really analyze it, sit down and think about it, put time into, what do I want to do? What when I do something, what does not feel like work? Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like it's something you think about. What are you passionate about? Being able to identify that, I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. You're going to spend too many hours. So if it's MOBA, if it's first-person shooter, anything that really that you like, that you find yourself playing for pleasure, I think that would be, as Cris said, like he's right 100%. Just choose that thing you're good at. I've heard it's better to pick games that are kind of new instead of like very old games, because older games mean that people have been playing them for decades or years now. So if you choose something that's more new, you have more time to practice, and you are like in a range of competition where you can have the same amount of hours that a pro. So that could be really interesting. But yet again, it's like what you want.
I like that both would say, but I'm a fan of the newer mobile as well as immersive. There's going to be mobile player opportunities. I think it's going to be much larger than console, arcade, or PC, and AR and VR and other kinds of cross-reality games are new. So people are looking for breakouts, which are not only breakout games, but also breakout players and personalities who are going to carry those forward. So I'd look at the new stuff.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to throw one last little curveball as we close here. So what is your game? What would be the game that you personally play if you're a pro gamer?
I mean, I'd have to go Smash Melee just because of all the years, especially growing up. And I think about all the years I got to beat Reeve, who's my brother, and that doesn't happen anymore. So yeah, I'd love to try to get better and somewhere get on his level, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
I do like puzzle games. I think I would choose Portal maybe, because it brings me like very nice memories, and I just enjoy it so much. So maybe something like that, something like more to the puzzle side. How about you, Jaymes?
I'm a very casual guy. I do Animal Crossing. I mean, it's the only thing that I've ever won that is probably Miss Pac-Man back in the college days. So don't look to me. Just don't do that.
Original Halo 2.
Yes,
Halo 2. That was down at University of Louisville, the LAN parties.
Yeah. Yes. See, that's what I was going to say, because I worked on the original Halo games. So I'm a massive Halo geek. So that would be my choice. Yeah, absolutely.
We got to set that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much for joining this panel and sharing your fantastic insights. And thank you for those who are watching. We really appreciate it. I have not seen any questions come up. And so given that, I think we're going to go ahead and close the panel. So
great.
Thank you again.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
Likewise.
Right.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.